enormous amount of anxiety because of how dramatic the technology has changed the game in the last 10 years. Before, you'd say, look, the technology would help us be better at what we are being, but now we're seeing these new animals show up that they're technology inventions, and it's changed the rules of competition in a number of industries, which has put every business leader on notice. It's just like, is this happening to my industry yet? And if so, what am I going to do?
And it's interesting, I mean, you picked up on technology driving the change. Do you see the balance between technology change as opposed to, let's say, business innovation change, like subscription models versus product models or customer service? Kind of, how do you see the balance between those as people are thinking about it?
Well, it's interesting. I think the subscription stuff and all that business model change came in with the consumer model, where we had the Facebooks and all the consumer guys doing cloud and mobile. And all of a sudden the world said, well, we like that too. And so we went from what was essentially originally a very consumer-oriented transactional model to now we're having whole industries trying to revamp their business processes to incorporate that. So I think the technology is the instigator, but once the customer is on a new plane, it's like, well, now the customer is the driver, and that's what we're seeing.
It's really interesting too, you use the word customer, because what we're seeing is sort of the trend on not only in the traditional business to consumer, or the so-called business to consumer in Facebook, but now, because of that trend, we see what you would classically think of as a business to business, people who don't really get to the consumer, but they are reaching through their distributors or whatever to get to the consumer.
Same thing in the venture world. There was B2B in the 90s, it was B2C in the first decade of this century. I think now B2B to C is critical. And you guys helping your customers deal with whether it's a consumer or a patient or a student or whatever. Yeah, big deal.
But these are definitely the trends, either becoming a disruptor, defending against a disruptor, and speed to get there.
Well, this is what's fun, because all the stories are about the people that initiate the disruption, but most of the action really is the people responding to the disruption. And so, and it's important because all the stories are about the Steve Jobs and the Netflix, these kind of people. That's not the player that I'm spending time with. I'm spending time with a guy that goes, I don't have to be Steve Jobs. I just can't let him take my business away from me. And so how do I do that?
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways, what we find is there's, one, when you're a changer, you've got to change an existing process and business method, and it's culture too to change. It's in ways a lot harder actually being the disruptor to be able to react to it.
Well, the thing that's really important that everybody has to realize when you're in the middle of this thing, and sometimes you get startup envy, but every large company has the one thing that startups want more than anything else, which is customers. And the customers want to stay with you. And so they don't need you to be a startup. What they need you to be is not a dinosaur. They need you to say, look, you've got to modernize your model enough that we feel like you're keeping up with the times.
That's very well said, very helpful.